Good morning and welcome to first in the series of multiple conversations that we are going to have with industry experts who are well known in their field of IT services and IT services outsourcing. Today I'm going to discuss relevant topics with a couple of my friends who I've worked with and who I've known for more than a decade now. Mr. Deepak Agarwal, who has been in multiple finance leadership roles with multiple IT services firms and captives or global in-house centers, and is currently in a leadership role with a group of tech-focused venture capital funds. We also have with us Mr. Girish Iyer, who has been in Chief Operating Officer role and CAO role with multiple IT services firms and IT services captives or global in-house centers, and also financial services firms. We'll start off with a quick discussion on APA or Advanced Pricing Agreement, as we call them. The thing that we would probably want to share our thoughts on, and we'll probably start with you, Deepak, is are APAs relevant, cost effective in the current situation, whether a firm or a captive or IT services firm should be going for an APA in the present situation?
Thanks, Jigar, for the introduction. I think the APS, since its introduction in 2012, has come a long way, and they are now more relevant than ever. One of the reasons for the importance of the APS is that it provides you a certainty in your managing your taxation related affairs. While it's a long and time-consuming affair, but it definitely takes away a lot of regulatory overhangs when you have to manage your financials and the tax-related matters. If you look at how the APS have progressed since their introduction, it takes about 3 to 4 years to get an APA. Once you get a judgment under the Advanced Pricing Agreement, it's valid for a period of 5 years. The key aspect here is that it's a very iterative process where you engage with the regulator or the tax authorities over a period of time, go through the various discussion process, and then mutually arrive at the pricing methodology or the margins that you would be applying in your while determining your taxable income over a period of time. So the biggest advantage of the APA is that it provides you a certainty and it helps you in avoiding litigations because every year if you have to discuss with your tax authorities about your margins or your pricing methodologies, it's only going to cost you more in the long run, and your money would continue to be stuck in litigation and the other matters. So APA are definitely beneficial to the organization. As you look at it, one of the key aspects of the APA which certainly needs improvement is the timelines. So today, the average time which is required by which is required to find enter into an APA or Advanced Pricing Agreement is between 3 to 4 years. Most of the APA takes anywhere between 3.5 to 4 years itself. Considering that the APAs are valid for a period of 5 years, the period taken in entering into an APA itself is a very long period. Having said that, yes, the timelines have come down over the period of last 5 years, but still there's a long way to go. We need to optimize the process in a significant manner. In the recent past, we have seen that a lot of tax assessments and appeal process have been made online, whereas the APA process remains an offline process as of now. There's a need to bring use of technology in managing these things. There's a need to create industry benchmarks that can be used while entering into an APS with various organizations which are providing similar kind of services, if not exactly the same kind of services. The idea is to speed up, fasten up the APA process. Similarly, once the initial period of 5 years is complete, the process for renewal of the APA agreement also need to be speeded up. This will bring in a transparency in the entire tax administration process in the country, which is one of the biggest point which anybody who wants to invest into India is about, that whether they would be harassed by the taxman. It takes away a lot of uncertainty around the tax administration. It helps to avoid litigation. and streamline the process from there on. So I think the APAs are relevant. If you look at the other jurisdictions outside India, APAs are there across all jurisdictions, US, Europe, European countries, Japan, everybody have got their own APA processes. Global benchmark for getting an APA process is up to about 2 years. So we have to go a long way before we catch up with the global benchmarks. But yes, APAs are relevant and they are more relevant than ever before.
Right. So the short verdict, Deepak, is APAs are relevant. In fact, they are more relevant than ever before from the point of view of bringing what you call predictability in your taxation.
Assessment. Yes.
In your taxation assessment, or for that matter, avoidance of litigation also related to tax matters. Would you say the same thing around relevance of APA for irrespective of the size of the captive? Would some of the smaller GICs or IT services firm be better off going for the safe harbor, or would they still be okay to negotiate and renegotiate APAs every 5 years?
Okay, so I think the APAs are still relevant irrespective of the size of the organization, but this is where I think the tax department has to come up with various options on that. A company with a much smaller size, let's say 500 to 1,000 people, kind of a delivery center, will have the complexity of a different level compared to a captive which has got 10,000 people. So one of the key ingredients of the APA arrangement that the underlying services or the core of the services must not undergo change, because APA follows a concept of a certain critical assumptions. So APA arrangement or the APA agreements are valid as long as those critical assumptions doesn't undergo a change. For smaller organizations which are providing a defined set of services, it is unlikely that those critical assumptions undergo a change. But when you look at a larger organization, I think they have to obviously spend that much more time because of they provide a wide array of services, they service a lot more geographies. So the complexity is obviously higher. But having said that, the significance of an APA to a smaller or a larger organization remain the same.
Right.
And the effort and the time involved would obviously reflect. You may take 2 years, you may take 4 years, depending on the size of the organization.
So thanks, Deepak, again for sharing your views on APA. If I were to summarize your views, APAs are relevant, in fact more relevant than ever, irrespective of the size of the organization. What you would like to see is probably ease of doing APAs first time and subsequent renewals, especially for smaller organizations. Right? With that, I'd like to ask you, Girish, what are your views on the subject?
So I think the first time I personally encountered APA or in fact transfer pricing related discussions was way back in 2005. What I see now as a benefit, depending on the hat that you wear, is that APA allows for an application of a lens to look at your organization, its processes, what the delivery that is happening out with a very different lens, and I find it kind of quite useful. By experience, I think what I've seen is, you often treat it as a one-time program, and there is always the renewal that comes up, so that's more of a change control, looking at what's changed basically. If some of our internal processes and the way we operate in many organizations are kind of geared, I think it should be a lot more seamless. One would also expect that, like a lot of the other jurisdictions or some of the other regulators where number of things can be done on a self-certified basis, plus with sort of certification from a external tax body or your auditors, etc. I think that will kind of also help ease the process.
What I'd want to understand from you or know your views on, Girish, is the current SEZs and STPIs or the export promotion regimes that we have from a point of view of infrastructure and the kind of infrastructure that is providing GICs and IT services firms for having so many people come sit and work from a particular place or an office, how relevant SEZs are in the coming times after COVID-19 related lockdown, and the fact that a lot of companies are moving to a great component or a larger component of work from home.
Let's start with some of the basics, right? So, in some sense, the special economic zones, STP, all the export promotion regimes that you just spoke of, they're all in lieu of the tax benefit that they are offering. They have put together a framework, rightfully so, to make sure that there is no abuse of the benefit. Now, in many ways, this framework has determined how we operate in some sense. What we have seen in the past sort of 6 months is that there is a lot more flexibility that people have availed, and I'm sure that they would like to continue to do so. So in those sort of contexts, I think the relevance of SEZ to that extent has to be reviewed both at an organizational level, and also the laws themselves may need to be kind of changed suitably. Okay. The important aspect, however, is that I think before we kind of caught up, Deepak and I were discussing, there is no substitute for human collaboration. Me personally, just the month of March, whatever work from home I did, that exceeded the sum total of all work from home that I would have ever done. So personally, it also depends on the leadership style, how you draw the energy. You collaborate, you innovate, you communicate. When there is a lot of human interaction, we all have to adapt. So I think it's going to be a hybrid model. I don't think it is going to be a zero office kind of situation, but 100% this has put more focus on infrastructure modernization internally, in terms of more virtual infrastructure. That also means allowing people to work more informally, etc. So I think that's sort of my view. And the other structural aspect around this is, let's say I want to set up a 5,000 seater captive or in-house center. What I would typically do to set up a 5,000 people in-house center is, I would look for a real estate. Most of the real estate availability is in SEZ. So, and those campuses are really world class, well built. They have a very sound ecosystem in terms of making it very conducive for a new age, collaboration and formation. So I think those things will change. They will come to some sort of new equilibrium.
But having said that, Deepak, what's the relevance of an SEZ or for someone who's looking to build a fresh unit from the point of view of managing their taxes?
I think SEZs has got several advantages. Financial benefits, which is in the form of tax savings, is one of them. So if you set up a unit in an SEZ, it does provide you tax benefits. More from an income tax perspective, for the first 5 years of your operation, your income is exempt. But we also have to bear in mind that the other taxation rules that have evolved. For example, last year, the government has reduced the corporate tax rate now down to 25%. We also need to look at other taxation provisions which works in parallel to the tax benefit available to an SEZ, which is about the minimum alternate tax, or more well known as the MAT. Under the MAT provisions, you are liable to pay tax at a certain percentage, 15% of your book profits, even if your income otherwise is not taxable, or you don't have a much tax liability under other provisions of the Income Tax Act. So the MAT provisions ensures that a unit operating out of an SEZ is still liable to pay tax, even if it is otherwise exempt from taxation under the SEZ, the taxation regime applicable to the SEZ. So that has to be kept in mind. So is the taxation or the tax benefit is the sole reason for a unit to operate out of SEZ? The answer is no. There are other factors that need to be looked at. One, as Girish has rightly pointed out, availability of quality working spaces is a very important consideration. So today, most of the technology, organizations, they operate in a very globalized world. Now, they need to create a workspace which is at par with what we see in the Western countries. The SEZ developers in India have been able to provide a very good quality office space to them at a reasonably affordable cost. So if you want to set up a delivery center, for example, in a central business district, CBD area, or any other part of the city, chances are that you may not get the space that you require in one place, which means that your operations are likely to be geographically spread, which only adds to the existing complexity in terms of technology, deliverables, and everything that goes along with that. So I think SEZ is the win-win solution. One, it gives you certain tax benefit, direct and indirect, and it also provides you to scale up your business within a geographical area with a very good infrastructure being made available to you in one particular place. So that's the real advantage to me of operating from an SEZ. Having said that, we also need to look at how the technology has evolved and whether our SEZ laws are keeping pace with the changes in the environment today that we work in. Post COVID-19, or we are still in the lockdown, what we have seen is that every organization, private as well as regulator governments, have adopting to the newer operating models. Today we have got all the meetings chaired by the Prime Minister himself done by use of technology through video conferencing channel. Elections are fought on social media. The days of the large rallies having millions of people coming is passive because of obviously the risk associated with that. Organizations have adopted use of technology in their day-to-day operations like never before. Even the school-going children today in all cities are attending their classes through use of various the video streaming platforms. So we have adopted to a change in the technology like never before. It's very similar to what happened after demonetization, where people moved to the digital wallets and other modes of payment. The change which happened in the 1 year after demonetization is what we are seeing in a similar fashion of how we have adopted technology in our day-to-day operations and day-to-day working life. People are more comfortable today working from home, and it's acceptable. It's fairly acceptable today. Teams are collaborating efficiently now because it's fairly accepted using all the video conferencing and other tools which are available. I think our SEZ norms have to recognize the new reality today. While the government has given a one-time exemption for people to operate from their home and the SEZ benefits to continue, I think the SEZ norms have to reflect this reality that going forward, more and more organizations are going to mainstream the work from home as a concept. So as we see more and more mainstreaming of a work from home concept, we'll see people working from home. There would obviously be some presence in the office, but technology is going to ensure that people can work from wherever they feel comfortable, right? And it is the job of the government to ensure that this happens. One should not be forced to work from office purely because there are certain tax benefits associated with it. The physical location is fast losing its relevance. I'm not saying that office space will cease to lose the relevance. Office space would still be relevant because of various other requirements. For example, there may be not everything can be delivered or serviced from home. There may be data protection issues, there may be confidentiality issues which may require you to still come to office. But still there is a significant part of the work which can be delivered at any given point of time from home. And we need to recognize that new reality. COVID is here. COVID is not going away anytime soon. We don't even know that how long the vaccines would be effective. So if work from home is here to stay, my regulatory environment, which is applicable to the SEZ, have to be updated to recognize the new operating realities. That would be my take on that, and I think the government is fairly proactive. We have seen they've already extended the work from home under the SEZ rules. I think it only needs to be streamlined or mainstreamed rather, and embedded into the SEZ regulation so that it becomes a new normal. That's what my thought process, my thought would be on this.
Right. So thanks, Deepak, again. If I were to summarize what I heard from you and what Girish shared with us earlier, SEZs are relevant because SEZs have traditionally provided us with world-class infrastructure, as you put it, good working spaces in the middle of the city or outskirts of the city where we can get hundreds of our colleagues to come and work. And SEZs do remain relevant, though some of the tax benefits that working from an SEZ was bringing to us are diminishing with some of the other evolving tax laws around that, but they still remain relevant from a point of view of saving taxes also. What Deepak, you suggested is that if government can evolve SEZ and related rules and law in keeping with the new reality, where work from home is going to be more of a mainstream than an exception, which they have recently made for the COVID-19 epidemic, then probably SEZ can become more relevant or can remain relevant for a longer period of time, right? So that's the conclusion that we reach, which brings me to another related topic. If some US or European firm wanted to set up a GIC or in-house center or a captive in India now, say the size of 1,000, 1,500 people, okay, with the new realities where work from home is the new normal, what do you think would be prudent for some new captive wanting to set up in India to do at this point in time? What are their alternatives or what are their options? What in your mind they should be doing?
I think if you really look at the organization are facing increasing cost pressures across the globe, when you're probably not looking at great uptick in the business volumes, right, till the COVID, we find a solution to the COVID. It's imperative for all organizations to be nimble-footed, reduce their cost as much as possible, and at the same time, India remains a very cost-effective destination. The cost of operating from India is fairly low compared to some of the Western countries, and this current COVID has actually created new avenues for the new captives to operate from India. One, they can optimize on their real estate cost further. So while they can locate in an SEZ, for example, they can still have a good portion, a good part of their workforce to operate from home, which even reduce the real estate footprint or real estate cost to a large extent. So I think this corona has provided even greater opportunity for organizations to have their presence in India at a lower cost point. Because now, what we have also learned in this process is that you may have your delivery center, let's say in Bangalore, but your team member can be in Mumbai or in Delhi or any other city of the country, and you don't have to incur additional cost, right? It also provides a great opportunity for the cities to be more efficient. You won't have the concentration of a large workforce in one particular part of the country. So you can have a geographically spread workforce, right, available wherever they are. They don't need to relocate. So you can use the skills where they are, right, across the country. You are not geographically bound by a particular location, and hire people in a shorter time frame, right, and be efficient on that. I think the corona or the COVID has actually opened new avenues and new opportunities for people who want to look at offshoring in a major way, to look at India, make a small beginning, and then progress from there. Because of the COVID, a lot of good real estate space has now become available, because a lot of organizations have really increased their footprint on work from home. but they have got a quality workspace readily available to them, which will help them to hire people and scale up very, very quickly. So I think a lot of these people who were sitting on the fence trying to explore whether they should look at India as a attractive destination, should definitely consider this in the days ahead. At the same time, I would also like to add that government is also, all government, not just Indian governments, are under increased pressure to increase employment opportunities in their countries. I think the governments would be very, very supportive if somebody wants to set up a delivery center here in India. Right? The overall environment, in my view, there are challenges. There would be challenges because how do you kickstart the operations, right? Working from home in a currently running organization is different than if you want to start an organization from scratch. But if you can manage those challenges, I think that time is just right. It is, all the right ingredients are in place for anybody who wants to set up a captive operations in India. And I see no reason why organizations should be hesitant at this point of time.
Thanks, Deepak. Girish, your views. What do you think this current situation offers to someone who's looking to set up a fresh in-house center in India?
One is your access to talent and location strategy when you come is going to be both the choice and the options have now opened up. What we need to be mindful of and extremely careful of in a global scenario is about how the data security and the information security and how are those aspects kind of handled in this. We have an opportunity now to, if you traditionally look at, depending on the unit that you take into consideration, the organization, by my experience, let's say, for argument's sake, roughly up to 5% of cost of a resource in India is accruing through is real estate. Yep. There is an option now, I'll again maintain, for me personally as well, and I think it's good for the workforce to have a hybrid environment where you also have got physical space and you also have the flexibility to work from home or a place of your choice when you desire. You can take some of this money and make sure that you are actually investing that money in mobility assets, making sure that, that sort of overall of infrastructure is kind of achieved in a way, because you're talking of fresh setups, there's no question of self-funding, but I think there is a very strong case for making sure that the way you work in terms of the infrastructure access, in terms of the the kit that you give, etc., to people to work, all of those configurations will change. And for a greenfield, for a fresh venture, you can start off with a very clean slate. And as we have said, see, one of the other things we covered in our earlier topic in SEZ, one of the things the SEZ does to a person who's running a business is at some level they ask you for a 5-year forecast. They want you to think ahead in terms of what your planning is going to be. Yeah. In today's day and age, that's a genuine effort that you go through any which ways, but the world around us is changing in a much shorter business cycle than the 5-year look ahead that is being expected out of people. So I think if I take that and some of is there really a tax advantage, and even if there is a tax advantage, is it something that you really want to pursue? So the other option to consider and an opportunity for a freshly set up operation in India is to look at an option outside of SEZ probably and say that, listen, I want to, of course these things are again contextual depending on scale, size, what you want to do and the tenor, but I would try to come out of it always if I had a choice.
Point. I'd also want to discuss what role do you think all these co-working spaces play in ensuring that the time to set up small and mid-sized in-house centers in India, especially when you are open to not going the SEZ route. Okay, the time to set up presence in India can be shortened.
Correct. I think you kind of hit the nail on the head. One is just the availability of real estate and the choices. What Deepak also covered is, we are now in a very different era, right? What a co-working space does is it gives you a faster time to market, because you have to just kit up the place and work, etc. Somewhere in my experience over the years, what I've seen is even a co-working space for a very large setup organization works out eventually in a way to the same as you kind of building out your own infrastructure, depending on the scale and size, right? Now, either let's take hypothetically a case of what you said, 1,000-seater, can people just co-work, let's say, or sit in a flexi working environment, or from a real estate strategy standpoint itself, yeah. How many players in the country today or can give me a solution where, okay, if I decide to have a distributed sort of delivery model just within a city, and say that, assuming 1,000, I say, and just drawing a line on the sand and saying that 50% at any point will need a physical space. How many of them can give me a 500 space flexibility? You can check in into any site or a cluster of location, etc.
Any of my sites
So
in Bangalore.
what a flexi working, co-working, more WeWork and those kind of setups that are allowing for that flexibility. Once you start looking at your business configuration, it may either fit in or it may not fit in. By real experience, what I have felt is that once you start talking significant numbers, then you have to structure a very highly bespoke deal, and at that point it will become equivalent to you actually pretty much leasing that space on a continual basis, because the transference of that risk is not about I don't 500 people seater, I may want one day and I may not want the other day. So some of these things are kind of practical considerations when we go down to implement down that part. But I think the idea, like I told you, that is here to stay is in principle, and in reality there is no concept of 1:1 individual to desk mapping, etc. And you will find a more hybrid solution. You could come up with a 70-30 model, you could come up with a 50-50 model, and you could come up with a 25% out of office and 75% in office. Whatever the ratio that suits your business, I think you will come to that config. The one important thing that I want to highlight, what I have observed over a number of years is, see, the true strength of our industry and the talent that we have has come because of two key drivers in some sense. One is our ability to understand the customer, the business that we are located in. Okay, so that domain expertise that is there, it is infinitely powerful. Okay. The second part of it, if I look at it, I said two themes, but let me extend it to three themes. The second part of it has been around our ability to retool ourselves to become more contemporary and be it the modern age, the cloud that we all want to go to, and we are already on it, etc. These technologies and the underlying way of how technology works has been changing at a much rapid pace, so that we have kept pace with. But the third and more important thing, if you look at our industry, that has really changed, where actually the magic is happening, and that is about collaboration. So when a technologist and an operations person or a finance person, working for that same domain, for that same purpose, are actually collaborating and working together to simplify things, to rework the customer journey, that has given immense power and value back, back to the customer actually. So what I feel is that in the current context, to your question of flexi working etc., and for the particularly new setup or any existing one also, we can come with a perfectly possible dynamic. Yeah. The other aspect which we looked at, we spoke about rechanneling some of the real estate efficiencies into some other investments, right? So it doesn't mean like real estate cost goes, you don't have to invest in your information security procedures, strengthen them, make it more purposeful. The other aspect, if you look at it, is typically it's a known one. Industry leaders have spoken about it. We all feel it on a day to day. You don't need a leader to speak about it, but commute time, things like a general enhancement in productivity can be achieved. So I think we have to come to that sort of proper sort of understanding and then evolve as we speak. But today that opportunity is there to leverage.
So I'll ask you the same question, Deepak. If you were the person or the leader in charge of setting up the India presence, the GIC or the in-house center of 1,000-seater, say, for any US or European firm, what would you do? I mean, would you take them the SEZ route? Would you take them the APA route? Or would you do something different?
I think APA is about having a certainty, better financial planning, and avoiding regulatory hurdles. SEZ is part tax and part an operating model.
And infrastructure.
Infrastructure, operating model gives you. Co-working space is an added dimension to this. So for example, when you want to start a captive in India, co-working spaces allows you to hit ground from the very first day. So while your regular facilities may take some time to be up and running, you can start all your operations in some way because you need to hire people, create the full support infrastructure to get going. The co-working spaces are a great option for that because without incurring much of a capital expenditure, you are able to kickstart your operations. There's another aspect of co-working spaces. It allows you to have a larger geographical presence without having a corresponding expenditure on that. For example, if you need to have a small, let's say 10, 20, 30 people facility in, let's say, Mumbai, instead of creating your own infrastructure, you can have your people being co-located in a co-working space. If you want to have, let's say, a licensing office in the country, let's say in the capital, Delhi, you can have again a small co-working space. You can, have your geographical spread without having the corresponding expenditure, because to operate your own facility, it requires a certain administrative effort besides the capital expenditure to make the whole thing work, which you may or may not be willing to incur in all the cases. Second, when your organization is growing, the co-working spaces can be a good filler in terms of your space requirement till you hit a certain critical mass. So let's say I have to add space to my facility, my existing facility, and I can add, let's say, an increment of 200 seaters or 500 seaters depending on the configuration which is available. But at a given point of time, you need, say, 30 people additional space. I think the co-working space in that scenario gives you a great opportunity to continue to grow, right, without incurring the additional cost which comes with it. So it is making you more agile, more flexible in terms of your financial management and delivery capability. It helps you to get the desired geographical spread which is required. For example, it may also happen, Jigar, that you have a client, or the India operations of an American client in Mumbai, and for some period you need to position some of your staff, right, to do knowledge transfer, provide services, or something like that. Co-working spaces are a great option in that case. Because SEZ is, you will set up your own facility, let's say larger 1,000 people or 500 people or even larger facility, when you know that this is the minimum size which would be there. It is not a short-term option. It is not an option that you step in today and after 1 year I say I want to slice and dice my facility. No, that is not possible. So an SEZ is a long-term vision, and the co-working spaces are various milestones to achieve your long-term vision. That's the way I will look at it. So all the pillars in a journey, the co-working spaces are, and there are various options which are available today, which can be used to fill the gaps which are there.
So you would say, till a time, there is no long-term commitment. Probably in the testing the waters kind of phase, a co-working space is a good option. But once you get to a critical mass, and once you have a long-term commitment to your India presence or your India in-house center, then probably SEZ still makes sense.
So historically, Jigar, if you look at it, organizations who wanted to set up the presence in India, they looked at plug-and-play facilities. Plug-and-play facilities have been existed for quite some time. Co-working spaces are nothing but a more refined approach to plug-and-play facilities. They are available easily, you can move in, and they provide, as we talked about, one of the advantages of an SEZ is it gives you a great infrastructure at a place. Same goes for co-working spaces. They give you a great infrastructure without incurring any capital expenditure and a shortest possible time. Almost all the co-working spaces are kind of a plug-and-play facility. They also give you an option to customize should you so desire. But obviously they come at an additional cost. But I think most co-working operators are demonstrating that kind of a flexibility to meet your business requirements today. So it works till you really have your strategy in place, you have a long-term vision, you have tested the waters, or for intermittent growth requirements.
Yeah.
So there are various growth phases of your organization where the co-working spaces can play an important role for various reasons, as I explained earlier. So you need to look at how your co-working space can complement your long-term growth story. And obviously, if you want to just test the water, whether India is the destination to be, I think co-working space offers a great opportunity for it to be there.
So you used the word plug and play, and the fact that co-working spaces allow that plug and play model to some of the people who are trying to test the water, so to speak, or who even come with a commitment initially. And there are players in the industry, of course, will not take names, where the main person is seated in the US and they have tied up with SEZ developers in Bangalore, and they have actually tied up millions of square feet of space, which is bundled as an offering, of course, along with other things like legal entity creation, management, the secretarial and the legal compliances around it, right? And they have managed to get scores of retail giants set up their US retail giants in particular set up their presence in Bangalore. Do you see that kind of a venture or that kind of a model is going to thrive in future, or with the new ways of working, as we put it, post-COVID, increased work from home, co-working spaces making themselves available as an option, do you think those kind of ventures will face competition?
They essentially, leveraging the talent in India is, I think it's not it's sort of an imperative in some sense. How you go about doing it is going to be built on sort of the elementary principle of trust. Because in today's global delivery operating model, etc., most Fortune 500, if you take UK FTSE 100 companies, etc., they all have a multi-dimensional sourcing strategy. They have at least minimum 2 country presence in terms of sourcing their delivery, etc. So essentially what happens is that today I think there is an opportunity to at least make sure that you can containerize and provide a plug-and-play environment for the compliances in a well thought-out way, and the businesses and the functions that are going to undertake the global delivery are kind of very poorly. The business, the leaders itself are focused on actually more value generation for the customer rather than getting kind of encumbered with a lot of do's and don'ts and framework. So to that extent, if today there is the capacity along with the real estate options, along with see the other aspect we didn't speak or touch upon in one of our conversations. It was covered as part of infrastructure, but traditionally for a large setup, the data center has been on-premise. We have now reached a level where to deliver the work, I think most tier 1 organizations have the virtual capability, etc. So if I take that infrastructure, if I take the compliances, etc., I think there is an opportunity and to kind of make these things much more plug and play with some select choices.
I think that movement of data onto the cloud has really aided that. So you need to have your own physical infrastructure at a particular location. The need to have that is going down. And now there are technology, there are tools which are available which will help people to work and collaborate irrespective of their physical location. So I think there are several options which are now available today, and the co-working spaces or an SEZ or outside an SEZ, it depends on the facts of the case. We need to look at what an organization's long-term plans are, right? Not everybody might want to spend millions of dollars to set up the facilities, for example. Depends on what they want and how they want to achieve. And there are options which are available which can be used today to have your India footprint. Essentially, that's the way I would look at it.
You look at it. Okay, so we'll summarize the entire discussion today. Of course, APAs are relevant, more relevant than ever, as you said. The only thing that you will want to see changing is possibly ease of entering into APA first time and subsequent renewals, both for
The entire administration of the entire process has to be simplified. It has to be time bound. The renewal process has to be streamlined basically. Some of these objectives can be achieved, and the need to look at the industry-wide data so that some of the smaller players can leverage on that. I think that if that can be done, the APA would be a great tool in the days ahead.
SEZ also is relevant, both from point of view or more from point of view of good working spaces that they have made available or good physical infrastructure that they have made available in various cities in India, and also from point of view of tax saving, in spite of the fact that alternative tax regimes have been evolving along with SEZ. What you would want to see happening in future is that probably the government should work to change rules and laws and particularly tax related things in SEZ to bring in work from home and think of it more as a permanent fixture than just a epidemic related thing.
So the primary two things that I would really like to see to the two regulatory changes which are very, very important to make the SEZ a real success story in the current environment. One, to give flexibility to people, or in a flexibility in the operating model where a part of the workforce can operate from home while still being affiliated to the special economic zone. Second, it's a long-standing demand of the industry that MAT should not be made applicable to the SEZ unit. If the objective of having an SEZ is to incentivize people to have operations over there, and one of the incentives that the government has given is that you will not be taxed for a certain years of certain period of time. Taking away that tax benefit by introducing another provision, I think it's a step or rather 2 steps backwards. If I'm in SEZ and you have given me certain tax benefit, the government should respect that. In my view, the applicability of MAT should be withdrawn from an SEZ unit, and the SEZ norms or the SEZ taxation regime which has been created has to be respected by all.
Right.
To me, that's an important consideration.
And the third thing, of course, that we discussed is the hypothetical situation of someone wanting to set up greenfield in-house center in India. all the present constructs, including the option of co-working spaces, are relevant and they can be explored depending on their commitment, whether they are coming in with a long-term or medium-term commitment or just testing the waters, and depending of course on their scale and the critical mass that they want to put in India, any of those options can be explored.
So I think the essence around any greenfield venture is clarity of purpose and thought, and then we are not in a virtual world. Taxation is here to stay. Our compliances are here to stay. Where the talent pools are available, productivity. In fact, we touched upon a number of things. So, but essentially, if you have clarity of thought, we can consider and make it simple if you are willing to trade off. Because what happens is when you chase one benefit, certain complexity kicks in. So, but today those options exist in terms of not getting into too many fixed commitments, but kind of have a lot of bridge solutions in terms of real estate, in terms of access to talent, partnering with the ecosystem also that we have. Yeah. So there are a number of things and options that are available today, and that is where I think fundamentally for any new venture, I mean, it's a very lucrative field and it's a very compelling proposition to enter now and not carry the baggage of the past in terms of how you have structured the talent pool that you have. And we didn't touch upon one thing. There is a high level of specialization. I mean, I covered it in an indirect way, what has happened thematically. But today, if you look at it broadly to incentivize economic activity, it is not just generic rules, but you see specific clusters of economic zones or appearing, right? So you've got an aerospace special economic zone that wants to promote a certain ecosystem around it, etc. You've got in Gujarat, where there is a very strong attempt being made to push for a financial, services kind of economic zone, etc. So what you are seeing, that's why I told you, what was earlier a much more generic platform, today the value has come because of the available knowledge, particularly around the domain and working that magic around. So I think it's fantastic.
So thanks Girish, thanks Deepak for making time, thanks for coming over here, and I'm hoping that we'll do this more often, both the current format, and we'll also try and do multiple Zoom sessions or video conferences to discuss specific topics. Thanks for making time.